Welcome to Communication Climates. As I dove into this topic, I found it really helpful and interesting. In 1965, Jack Gibb, a psychologist, came up with six pair of supportive and defensive behaviors that help us understand communication climates. Defensive behaviors are similar to those what we see in animals. They either flee or stand their ground and fight. In Dr. John Gottman's research, he developed the four horsemen that were key in his being able to predict divorce with 93% accuracy. One of those four horsemen is defensiveness. And whether we see it in ourselves or whether we don't, defensiveness happens. It's part of who we are. It's in the amygdala. And when that amygdala gets triggered, our response is to flee or fight like the animals do, which is very interesting, and it's needed to protect ourselves from harm or danger. But in communication, it's something that we need to work on and learn how to manage that a little bit better in our lives. So here are some of the defensive climates. And there is judgmental language, controlling, dictating the situation, manipulative strategies, indifferent attitudes, superiority, and being dogmatic. I loved learning a little bit more about each of these because just understanding a little bit more of what causes defensiveness in us can help us to recognize it and also to help manage it moving forward. So, judgmental and evaluative language. And this looks like labeling. This is where someone might say, "You are so lazy," or "You are so inconsiderate," or "You are so rude." The instinctive reaction in us is to fight or flee or to even shut down and quit talking and recluse into ourselves. So we need to be careful of that kind of language of being judgmental and being evaluative because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know the context that the other person is going through. I read this story the other day. There's this woman and she's in the store with her child and he's throwing a temper tantrum on the floor. And she is doing the very best that she knows how to manage the situation. But someone else says, "Can't you even manage your own child?" Well, they don't know the context. Later or earlier that day, she has four older children that are very well behaved. And she just came from the doctor with this younger son, and he is on the spectrum, the low spectrum of autism. And so a lot of the parenting techniques that she has studied, that she has implemented, don't work with him as well. So this is just like, we don't know what we don't know, and being judgmental and evaluative like that doesn't help the situation, and it causes that fight or flee tendency. So controlling and dictating the solution, the second of Jack Gibb's defensiveness climate. This looks like someone putting their thumb on top of us and feeling attacked. This makes me feel attacked. It makes me feel squashed, like I don't have a say in things, like I'm just a robot for them. And sometimes this has to happen in a work environment, but there's also times when it doesn't have to happen. And there can be more open discussion about things. And so putting our thumb on top of people doesn't help them to feel appreciated, doesn't help them to feel like they have a say. It makes them feel like a robot. So let's move into manipulation. Manipulation is being clever and crafty. It's not really saying what is meant or how a person really feels. It's hiding the real goals behind what they're trying to accomplish, using emotional manipulation to gain sympathy, fear, or intimidation to control others. There may be some isolation from friends and family. They may play the victim, or they may gaslight and make you feel like that it didn't really happen, or using flattery and promising future favors. So just to go a little bit more into the key characteristics of manipulation in communication is guilt tripping. And this looks like, you should do this for me, right? Or gaslighting. You must have imagined that, or you're misremembering things, or that did not happen. That is not what I was doing. Playing the victim. You always pick on me, or no one understands how hard I'm trying, or I'll go sleep in the car then. Using absolutes. You never listen to me, or you always do this. Then there's the emotional blackmail. If you don't do this, I'll be so disappointed. Shifting blame. The reason we're fighting is because of you. So they take something that happened, or they remember something from a while ago, and they shift what is happening right now onto you, even though that may have happened quite a while ago. So there's different things that can happen here. These are just examples for you to look at and to be aware of. The neutrality and indifferent attitudes. This looks like apathy, lack of concern. I don't care what you think, or ignoring the other person. The superiority defensive climate is I know more, I am better than you, and I am smarter than you. We probably all know someone that has a superiority effect on us. Certainty or being dogmatic. I know I'm right because I say so. This happens a lot of times with parents and children, and the reaction from others usually is they want to prove them wrong. Or in children's cases, it's like they just don't understand, and so they don't follow along with the certainty. Like, don't touch that stove. Well, they still reach out and they touch their hand, right? So until sometimes we have experience with that, it's hard to believe in that certainty. And so just sometimes explaining things a little bit better can be helpful as well to steer away from that certainty or that dogmatic situation. As we transition into a supportive climate, our descriptive language, being problem-oriented or mutuality, spontaneity, empathy, equality, and provisional solutions, being flexible. So descriptive language, if we go back to what the first one was, which was the labeling or the evaluation, judging people, that's like saying, you are so rude, right? Instead of saying that was rude or you are so rude, you could say, I'm bothered because you left before I was ready. So one way to do this is to stop and ask yourself, what did I hear you say? And what did I see you do? And then use those things in being more descriptive instead of judgmental. So this does not promise that there will not be a defensive reaction. We are all human, and it still might trigger a defensive reaction, but it definitely will tone things down and the defensive reaction won't be as severe. So just keeping that in mind can be helpful, to use more description in your words. Problem-oriented or mutuality. If you think about what the actual problem is by separating the people from the problem, I'm going to give you an example of how to do this. So here is a boss telling an employee, you need to show up for work on time, as they just got there at 8:30 or whatever time they got there. Rather than saying that, they can stop and say, okay, what is the real problem here? The real problem is he has a business to run. This person was hired to open up the doors at 8 o'clock. And for the last 3 days, that has not been happening. And so he can reframe it by saying, the office needs to be opened on time. And for the last few days, I have noticed that has not opened until 8:30. part of your job is to make sure the office is open on time. What needs to change or be done differently so the office is opened on time? And at that point, that gives them an opening to explain what might have happened or what's been going on. Maybe they're having some problems at home. Maybe it's a daycare issue or whatever it is. It opens the conversation to talk about it and to explore different options on how to work with that. Instead of shutting someone down, that first statement is you need to show up for work on time would put me in defensiveness and make me want to say, oh, I do show up on time, you know, because just the last 3 days I haven't shown up on time, but I do show up on time. It just kind of creates a defensiveness. So I want you to pause the video for just a minute, and I want you to try to separate the person from the problem with this statement or the other statement. You need to get your clothes in the laundry basket, or you never get the trash out on time. So just take a moment and pause the video and separate the person from the problem. The other one might be you never get the trash out on time. So the problem is the garbage man comes on Thursday mornings around 9 o'clock, and the garbage man passes by our house and doesn't get the garbage. So that's the problem. So what needs to happen to make sure that the garbage gets out on the street by 8:30 a.m. in the morning every week? So there's different ways of taking the person out of the problem and making it more about the actual problem of what's happening. So I hope that was helpful. So the next one is spontaneity. This is the opposite of being manipulative. There are no hidden motives. You are open, you are honest, and you're not trying to manipulate or hide anything from the other person. The opposite of neutrality is empathy. So this is looking at things from the other person's perspectives. I care about your opinions. I want to hear about your opinions. I want to hear about your point of view and your perspective. What's going on in, with your heart right now, or, seeking and being curious about their feelings. The person here is not the problem, but they may have a problem that they're stewing about inside. And sometimes before you can address a problem, you need to take care of the person first and help them get to a good space. So empathy is a great tool to learn and to practice and to put into your communication skill toolbox. Equality is the opposite of superiority. This is, we both bring different knowledge and experience to the table that can be useful. We both have all the basic needs and experience emotions of the human race. So I'm reading this book. It's called The Habits of a Peacemaker, and it is by Stephen T. Collis. And in his first chapter, the first habit is to come to the table with the realization that we do not know everything. Okay. It's like I have this computer in front of me, and I know how to, punch the keys and some certain things, but I don't know all of the components that are inside the computer. I don't know how they process them, how they put them all together. I don't know about all the programming that goes on. There's things that we just don't know. And so coming to the table, if you dig deeper, we don't know the context of everything that's going on in people's lives. We each bring different skills. We each bring different knowledge. We each bring different experience to the table that can be useful to everyone in helping to come up with a solution. So coming to the table with an attitude of equality instead of superiority is a great way to help move things forward as well. So the last one is provisional solutions. This is the opposite of being with certainty, right? Be flexible. Leave the door ajar just a little bit. And so instead of saying, I know I am right, say, I think I am right. or I think this happened in this way last week. Allow for the possibility that you might not be right because humans don't remember everything. It's just impossible for us to remember everything. So if we leave that little door ajar, then that's helpful because you probably have experienced a time when you thought you were right and then you were proven wrong and you had to eat crow. It's not really a good feeling. But if you leave that door ajar a little bit, that leaves that space for that to happen. The beautiful thing here is that the opposite, the difference between humans and animals. We can think critically. We can make a choice. We can seek understanding. We don't have to be defensive and go into fight or flight mode in the communication process. We can ask the other person to help us understand what has contributed to the rudeness or laziness. So like if someone says to you, you are so rude, but they haven't learned these skills, perhaps on our end, we can be a little bit more proactive and we can say, well, I'm not sure I really understand what I did that was rude. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit more and help them to be a little bit more descriptive and so forth so that communication can happen. Still can trigger emotions in us, but if we can learn to focus more on these supportive climates and being more proactive with them, then it will definitely help us to have better communication with others in our interpersonal relationships, in our work relationships, and just all around. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you can take something from this and be able to implement it into your lives. I invite you right now to take just 5 minutes and set yourself a goal on something from this lecture that you want to implement into your practice of communicating with others. Thank you so much.